What's up, PlayStation Universe, and welcome to episode 32 of PlayStation Fix. My name is Will Robinson, and joining me this week we got Kyle Prawl.
Yes, sir. That was a pretty good intro for being so tired. I
Yeah,
give you props for that.
yeah,
The enthusiasm was there.
yeah, we're still. Well, if you guys would have noticed, anybody who follows, we didn't have one up last week, and we apologize for that. But E3 craziness still had a strong hold on us, surprisingly.
A
It
stranglehold,
was a
you might even
stranglehold for
push
sure.
it
Yeah,
to. A legitimate chokehold,
it was
actually.
pretty impressive. But yeah, so we're gonna do what we would have done last week, at least for a little bit, and we're gonna talk about some of the. Well, I guess we're gonna just kind of general impressions of the show. I guess are we gonna compare it to previous ones? We did that for individual conferences. We didn't do the whole show, I guess, yet
Yeah,
for
I mean,
this
I've
year.
got, I've got some feelings about just how the show treated me on a personal level, and then
Yeah.
also just, the show in general.
Hmm.
I mean, I feel like it was an extremely strong show that felt a little underwhelming to me in some respects. I it's hard to put a pin on why that might be. Like the
Mm.
conferences were, well, the one conference that really matters to us, Sony's press
Yeah.
conference was incredible, one of the best they've ever done. I don't know if you can definitively put a pin in it because it's all about which games you like most. Like if you're one
Yeah.
of those people who were extremely stoked for The Last Guardian or, beyond amazed at Final Fantasy VII coming back, then I think it's hard to top last year. But I
Hmm.
am probably more excited. I would say I'm certainly more excited to play God of War, for example, than I am The Last Guardian. So, like,
Yeah.
there's one example there where this was better for me.
For sure. Yeah. I was actually thinking about that afterwards, where it was like I was glad that we didn't do our reactions until the morning after,
Hmm.
because I think it made it, and even just like sitting on it a little longer too, it was just like it was in the moment, it was really awesome and it was really exciting, but there was a lot of, even though they didn't have like a lot of business talk and things like that, there was still a lot of like nothing at the same time, or a lot of games that were just kind of, there were lot more teasers than I teasers
Mm.
versus like actual games that were
Yeah,
there. I think the percentage might have been about half and half this year, where they didn't have as much like content like this is happening right now and this is going to be out here.
yeah, like here's an announcement, here's a
Yeah,
date for something. Yeah, it was pretty devoid of dates. I did notice that. I mean,
yeah,
it wasn't like, oh shit, that's coming out 2016, or oh my God, that's January next year. It was really just trailer, trailer, trailer,
yeah,
trailer.
which was
So
awesome. But they
really
just
whetting
didn't
your
give us
appetite.
any. They didn't give us any substance to like look forward to, or specifically like time to like get excited for
Hmm.
this year. But I mean, it's still like having a full orchestra there the entire time was just insane. Like
It
that was so
really,
cool.
really was. That was a very unique experience for an E3 show. It lent sort of an air of elegance in a way. I don't know if elegance is really the right word, but it was more just momentum, or it solidified it as a momentous moment to be there in that ballroom
Hmm.
and just ready for what was to come. I really liked too, and this maybe didn't translate well for anyone who watched the stream at home, but the way they layered environmental effects behind their screen. For
Yeah.
one thing, I love that it was just a single screen versus the multiple screen display they've
Yeah,
used
they
in years
just they
past.
had your focus. Like they had
Yeah,
your
they did.
complete
And like
focus.
and they can be virtually guaranteed that everyone in the audience is going to see the same things at the same time, whereas in the past they have literally done like pieces of trailers that are at different time
Yeah.
points on like three different
And
screens or
not bring out 10 indies at the same time playing their games so you can't
yeah, to just
even
like
see what's
blitz with
happening.
them. No, I know. And I can't even imagine
Yeah.
how that would translate
That
on a
was like,
stream.
yeah, 2 years ago though, like when they did that, I was just like, there were like 5 or 6 games that came out during like the middle of the conference I didn't even know were announced, just because they had so many people at once, like playing all these different games, and it just went by so quick. And
Yeah.
it was way more down to earth this year, and just was like, that was the best thing for them was it's just like we know you're here for games, so here are some games.
Yeah, and here's some stuff that you finally like you've been waiting for and we can finally show you. Like
Yeah.
here finally it's the next chapter of God of War. Here finally is
Hmm.
Sony Ben's game they've been working on. Here at long last, after all you're asking, is something Crash Bandicoot related, the remaster. So
Yeah.
it had a lot of
They were just the remaster. Nothing else happened with Crash Bandicoot.
no, certainly nothing that needs to be touched upon or brought back to the
Right.
surface of our
Yeah.
nightmares.
So the Sony
Uh,
conference was awesome. But after that
Yes.
was so I think well, it's fair to say I think we're just going to talk a little bit about what it was like for us being there for like
Yeah,
media
yeah.
side, just so
Oh,
that you guys
absolutely.
can get a somewhat of a taste of what was happening for the just the general path of our experience this year.
Yeah.
Uh, what was really awesome for us is that we all got to go in. They had VR demos set up on the floor for everybody who attended, but there was also a separate area that I think the ones on the floor were ones from last year primarily.
Yeah, they kind of had yeah, it was broken up as we have members of the press that are trusted partners of ours that have been doing coverage for us for years. They get to play these kind of VR games in one setting, and then it was more of a I don't want to say more of a public setting because like Conan O'Brien was down there, but they had like a broader array of
Yeah,
demos that were
that
not
was just
just
kind of for
VR.
like
It was
everybody who was at the conference versus just
yeah.
like because I mean yeah, there's a lot. I mean, there's you can like we've gone to the Microsoft conference. We don't cover them, so it's like if Microsoft had done the same thing, it's like clearly we would not have gone to their special game thing. So it's like since we're so PlayStation
Hmm.
centric, we were able
Yeah.
to get in and get
Although
some really
they
awesome
did catch
impressions.
on to us there.
Yeah,
We don't get invited anymore.
yeah, yeah, to Microsoft. But but yeah, we got that's where we got to try out all those awesome VR games and talk about them in the videos. It was like Batman, Farpoint, Bound, Final Fantasy. What were the other ones? Res Infinite. There's a whole Psychonauts. All these different ones. They were all up there. Had food up there. That was really cool.
Yeah, it was a good chance for us to, I mean, for you, you got to play Batman VR. I
Hmm.
got to play Bound VR. You played Farpoint. I played Final Fantasy. So it was a chance to go. And that's the thing about the E3 setting is that more than just a chance to hang out with PlayStation developers, it was a chance for us to actually
Hmm.
get to play VR because the thing is in
Yeah.
such high demand when you get on the show floor. I mean, Adam himself tried to schedule time with Resident Evil like every morning throughout the week and just consistently
Yeah.
failed because the demand for it was so high. So
Yeah.
it
And
was
that
nice that we actually got to try it for a bit.
for sure. And that was the thing that was so exciting, I think, for this year was to see the influx of major developers backing VR and it being pushed a lot more than it was in previous years. It was certainly 2 years ago, but last year by a lot even. Where it's just like it was hard to get in to try anything VR related last year. They were just these kind of smaller things, but then like Sony conference, they teased Batman Arkham VR, and then there it was after the show for key members of the press. So that was really awesome, just from not to just be for like a total drought from when it was announced to when we get to hear more about it. It was like you can play this now, and it really
Mhm.
gave a lot of confidence that like a studio like Rocksteady is investing almost their whole resource, all their entire team's resources into making a VR game.
Yeah.
So that's what's really exciting to me is seeing where this is really just starting to get
Yeah,
traction under it.
it's validating. I mean, it speaks to and it's great because it's demonstrative that the development community is really catching on to it, which with past, that just really drives home the fact that this isn't an accessory.
Right.
This isn't like PlayStation Move. This isn't like the PlayStation iToy camera. Like this is a full-fledged initiative to stand alongside the big boys in the VR space. And
Hmm.
if nothing else, this E3 drove home to me that VR is something that I definitely it's funny to reflect back on it. That might be the biggest thing I took away from it is that we had a couple podcasts where we talked about how, VR hasn't had its coming out party yet. VR hasn't sold
Hmm.
itself to me yet. We don't know the games. We don't know if there's going to be enough there to warrant a purchase. But like coming home from this year's E3, I think the biggest takeaway was that, yeah, that was its
Hmm.
coming out party. Like that was, and to me, it worked. Like
Yeah.
to me, it's a matter of, I don't know if I'll be getting it day one, A, because I missed the pre-order window for it. So I don't even know if they're going to be
Yeah, I
available.
checked on it like couple days ago, and it still is. There's nothing available. I was like,
Yeah,
ah.
so it's a bit it's hard to
But but
swing in
yeah,
there.
like I totally agree with you on that front. For us, it certainly was. That's what I'm interested in, is like for you all listening to that. Maybe you can let us know how it felt to you guys, because obviously not being there to play it or being behind closed doors to play it, because we didn't. That's the thing is like VR still you can't just like show it to people and get the point
Mhm.
across. So that's that's the interesting thing to me is that was it as impactful as it was for us, did it have that same kind of gravity for the general fans that were out there watching the live streams and all that
Yeah,
stuff?
and I would say probably not quite the same impact. I think there was a
Yeah,
lot of discussion about VR, and there has been for a couple of months now. So
right.
that probably sort of drove it home. But what is nice is that there's PlayStation VR demo kiosks in Best Buy stores around the country now. So
Oh, there are. I didn't know that.
yeah,
That
so
was
there's a
exactly what I said needed to happen. So awesome.
yep, and that is what happened, good sir. I'm not sure how long they'll be available, presumably only for a few weeks.
Yeah,
But still, it's an I'm sure they'll come back before October.
right.
Kind of flit in and out of stores,
And
so
same
people.
with things like I just got one because I had ended up getting a new phone, but the VR gear with like the Samsung and stuff like
Mm.
that gives people a really good taste of what like PlayStation VR is like. So if you think that's really cool, then
Yeah,
you're
that's
in for just like a hell of a treat once the full
yeah,
blown first game console headset really comes out.
yeah, very true.
So, but anyway, Sony's conference. Obviously, we're biased a little bit, but Sony's conference was easily the best, I'd say, from what we saw.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It blew all the others out of the water.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that was an awesome start to the week. I guess in terms of the show as a whole, I've had E3s in the past that I felt more fulfilled by as a gamer.
Yep.
The appointments and the things I saw throughout the week, some of them were real standouts. Like getting to see a little bit more of God of War, see a little bit more of Days Gone was great. But some of the other stuff on the show floor, it felt a little unmemorable. And I don't want to
Hmm.
drag names through the mud or drag publishers through the mud in any respect, but it felt like
Right.
a lot of my demos felt very rushed, in the sense of
Yeah.
we don't have a lot to show you, and there's not much pomp and circumstance, or like maybe there wasn't as much planning put into the way you present your game, or like the setting, or what's
Yeah.
the presentation, like what's the narrative you're trying to communicate to me. It was a lot more of just a drop you in front of a screen to draw your own conclusions from it. And the
Yeah.
tough thing about the E3 show floor is that it's very loud, it's very visually busy, and it's really hard to appreciate what you're playing in that setting. You got to like wait in line for something.
Hmm.
Well, for some things, you got to put on a headset that 100 other people have worn.
Yeah.
If you're playing Final Fantasy 15, the volume is cranked up to ear-splitting,
That was in all of
head-destroying
Square's booth.
levels.
Yeah. But that was
Um,
the thing is just like there was not as much to play this year that was interesting for me at least compared to the last couple of years, and there were a lot of games that were already out that were at the show again,
mm,
like Street Fighter and uh, well, like Shadow Warrior was showing off a new multiplayer. Was that there were a few others I can't remember, but there were like a whole bunch of games that had like these giant areas that have been out for a while already, and I was like, why are these here?
yeah.
Like, why aren't you showing off other like that was the thing that stood out to me the most, is it just seemed like there was not a lot. There was not. This was like it was like a dry spell almost for a lot of companies for like really heavy hitting titles that they were trying to push. There were some that were really took over in areas, but there were some booths that were just almost purely decorative.
Yeah, that's very true.
It was
Yeah.
more than last year and the year
Like
before.
technically, the Resident Evil house, you could, I think, get inside that house and like look around, and there was stuff to do in there, but I never got over there, and
That
it
was just
seemed.
yeah. They had some VR demos set up in there, I think, but
Oh, so that's probably why then we
yeah.
weren't able to get on the schedule to
But
get
then there
into
was like
it.
the 2K booth is pretty much the same like the last few years, but they didn't have like they had the same amount of space, but they didn't have like last year they had Battleborn, the year before they had Borderlands, and they had Evolve over there that same year too in that area.
Mm.
And just like this one was just like Mafia 3, big sign, and then the trailer that they've been playing, like that they just had a big TV and the like elaborate uh, set up to look kind of like a little town somewhere, which was really cool. But it was just like we couldn't interact with it at all.
Hmm.
It's just kind of interesting. But we easily spent the most time at Square's booth, which actually kind of surprised me. Even though I
Yeah,
mean I
me
love
too.
Square's games, but it was just like usually I'm not just like there most of my time.
Yeah, well, it was also a case where a lot of the stuff we saw during the week were things that I wasn't really aware were coming out. Like that's part of it too, is that
Yeah, that's true.
we didn't have a great idea of like what the big games of the show were before we got there, and then we found out, oh, like the games that we think are really cool are things like I Am Setsuna and
Yeah,
Final Fantasy 15 and Kingdom Hearts. I'm listing all the Square titles, of course,
right.
but you saw Vampire, you saw the Technomancer, so there were some
Hmm.
little niche surprises in there, but I guess it was yeah.
Oh, that was the other thing was thinking about, like the Sony area. Yeah, that was where a lot of games that we've already seen that were out there again. Like, well, they were showing off Don't Starve. I think they had
Mm,
the same thing, and like other games like that, where it's just like there wasn't as much variety, or there was
yeah.
a lot of repeats for things. So it was just kind of
And this wasn't like a brand new game that you've seen before. Like, yeah, and it was sort of like there wasn't I felt less prepped by the teams that were there for the things that I was going to see. Like you walk into Sony's the PlayStation World, that is
hmm
the section of South Hall that they take over, or West Hall rather, and it's like there's Let It Die, there's Gravity Rush
mm.
remastered, or Gravity Rush
Gravity Rush
2.
2 is that one, yeah.
So there's a bunch of things sprinkled around there, but it felt like I don't know. It's just like it's difficult to describe it. It's like nothing. There were good games on display,
Yeah,
but nothing to be
all the games,
really jazzed for.
right?
All the games that you needed to be really jazzed for that would dominate this year's show, they did not have show floor presences. I guess
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Because
I
like
mean,
Death
well,
Stranding,
Farpoint was there too. They had a really awesome setup, but that was one that we already tried or we already got to play. So for us, it
Mhm.
wasn't that excited, but that was one that was completely packed the entire time. So that was really cool to see.
Yeah, it was cool to see. It also speaks to one of the problems with this year's show, though, was that it was almost impenetrably busy, at least on the first day.
70,000 people.
I mean, just absurd. Like this has gotten way out of hand and is so far beyond what they
Like they're
said
really
several
like
years ago.
they're almost like literally almost like they probably are exceeding like building codes.
Oh, well, I
Like
would think
easily
so.
like by like
Yeah, like at
they
the
have
end of
like
the morning
twice
when
as many
everyone
people than they
storms that.
should.
Oh,
Like
for
yeah, so
sure.
anybody, yeah, if anybody thinks it's just like super fun, like easygoing time at E3 is like this year, no, like you could barely move. It
This year
was
was a lot of
insane.
work. Yeah, this year was a
It
lot of
was
work.
crazy, and like that's not obviously it was really cool. I mean, we're not going to try to make it sound like oh pity us because we went to E3,
No, not at
but
all.
it was just yeah, it was really crazy. I mean, I'd encourage people to try to get out there for sure, but it was
Mhm.
you
It's not
better
for
try yeah not have too many because nobody will be able to
Yeah,
get in anymore.
yeah. So I guess the on the whole, I would rate the show for me at around an 8 out of 10. Like I really enjoyed my time there. I
Yeah.
saw a lot of cool games. The conferences were awesome, but in general, just the show floor was a little underwhelming because I
Yeah, there
felt
wasn't
that
that standout one that I felt like I had to go
yeah.
see.
And somehow there were less booths this year. Like there has been notions about E3 downsizing, but then it was busier with people. So it
Yeah.
just was this kind of bad cocktail of like games that just couldn't hold a candle to the cool stuff in the press conferences, just filling the show floor. But then also there was a little less to see. Like EA was off site, they weren't on the show floor itself.
hmm
And then somehow there were more people than ever, which made it hard to get around. Just a whole mix of stuff. We did get to see Batman though. There somehow the year without Arkham Knight was
Yeah.
still the year of Batman.
Yeah. Did Batman VR and then Telltale Batman.
Yeah, the Batman series, yeah.
That was really that was yeah, that whole that's the one thing that developers do. Some developers do really well is just like making it just they transforming their game making their game reality in the booth that you're in.
Yeah, they really go all out.
That was really
Telltale, of
cool.
course, built a faux Wayne Manor lounge, complete
hmm
with cocktail bar and a modified bat cave.
Yeah, that was really cool.
So some really, and that's fun to like think, like look at some of the other booths, even in like that same realm that are just kind of like cubicles,
hmm
or what have you. But yeah, I was a little bummed too to see that like Final Fantasy 14, that's just my personal bias, had such a limited showing. But of course, the game is like 2, 3 years old now, so it makes sense that they would only have one
Yeah.
battle station, for
Yeah,
eight
that
people
was
to play.
super cramped from last year. And then I never got a bag. That was kind of sad.
I never got a
They
bag
never
either.
showed up every time. Like that was weird. Like they're so if the people that haven't seen or know about that, they hand out like Atlas and Final Fantasy or Square do like Final Fantasy 14 specifically hand out poster bags all the time,
Mhm.
and they were just like gone.
Yeah,
Like
people
I
all
didn't
over that.
see any of them this year. Like they were it was
Which also
insane.
speaks to like a lot more public people being
Yeah.
there because even though like press, journalists, writers,
Mhm.
YouTubers, we all get excited about this stuff too. Like I get
Yeah,
excited about some of the merch and the
that's because
swag.
we're all fans when going into it, or most
Absolutely,
most of
yeah.
us, I would say, easily are fans.
But
There's,
but you can sort of feel the difference between someone who's there for work and someone who snuck in. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like the people who snuck in are the ones literally running and pushing people over as they get
Yeah,
into South
and
or West
there are
to
people
get.
who legitimately do sneak into E3 just for people
Yes.
to know. We're not just saying that as like a derogatory thing for fans who go
For
there.
other
It's,
websites or
it's
anything.
like,
No, no,
yeah, no,
yeah.
no. There's like
They
for sure, yeah. There's the people who like paid to come in and
right.
they're fine, like they're really awesome and they get excited about it and they get really into it. But there are just people that they just like wreck everything when you're
Mhm.
running through
Yeah.
there and
And
distract everyone.
I also don't mean to be snooty about it either, where it's like, oh, there's no fans shouldn't be here. There's no
Yeah.
reason.
But
It's
there were
more just like
20,000 fans went to E3 this year, which is
yeah.
more than
So
ever in the past. So I mean, it's awesome, but it's also it just makes it more challenging for us at
yeah,
the same time.
and they set the expectation several years ago that they were going to filter it down to be media only. So it's more about expectation. Like I go there expecting
Oh, that's
to
true. Yeah, I forgot they
see
said
fellow
that.
writers and talk to people who are really knowledgeable in the industry and who just have some really substantial hands-on time with these games. But it was a at least this year it felt like a mix of publishers being a little less prepared, like maybe treating E3 with a little less pomp and circumstance, but then also here's just a flood of people that
Yeah,
weren't there before. So
there's definitely a weird kind of identity crisis going on with that because some publishers, like for sure,
yeah.
like Bethesda's conference, like they want their fans in the show and to be part of the experience, and that's awesome. But there are other developers there that clearly they just want press coverage because well, for one, a lot of those games just don't get covered very often,
Yeah,
and
very
it's
true.
hard. It's really easy for them to get lost if there's 20,000 non-media running around and playing those games and not letting other people get in to try to cover it. So it's like there is definitely a give and take on end for a lot of it, where a lot of people like Bethesda who have full name recognition on everything they do, they just want everybody to be there and everybody to be around them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it says a lot that like the games that are really like the companies that you would think would have really
Hmm.
big show floor presences, like Bethesda's coming out with a ton of stuff. They have Quake Champions, they have Dishonored 2, Elder Scrolls spin-offs and Fallout mods, Fallout
Hmm.
DLC. Yet they have absolutely no shore floor presence. Well, they have, it's like a little showroom where you can like look at the Dishonored mask through a case. But it's like these companies increasingly, Sony
Yeah.
included, with their offsite VR demos are like saying, we don't need to give the show floor a lot of cool factor or a lot of pomp and circumstance. We can do our
Hmm.
stuff totally at the conference and just stream it to the world, or we can do our stuff off-site and just avoid the madness. So yeah,
Hmm.
identity crisis I think is a great way of describing
Yeah.
it. It
And
kind of
well, it's the same. Like there was a lot of games that I went to Focus Home Interactive, and they have tons of games at their booth, and part of it is like they have so many that were there. Like I had an appointment for a half-hour block, and they shoved in four different developers and four different games
mhm.
in that half an hour. So it's just like they just there wasn't enough time for people to do stuff, and that which was kind of sucked. And one of the games I didn't even get to an appointment for, I just went and played because I saw it was called Shyness. It was like
Mhm.
an RPG that's coming up, that action RPG that was really interesting and reminiscent of actually kind of made me think of Okami in one sense with the battle system, but it does like it pulls you into like kind of a separate zone when you fight, and it's a one-on-one fight, and if you have encounter multiple enemies at once, it's like a you fight them one at a time in succession without a break, and then it was just
Okay.
really colorful world and just interesting thing. But it's like I never would have known about that had I not just been able to take a little bit extra time in that booth because it was kind of off to the side. It was pretty big, but it was still off to kind of the side out of the main flow of everyone. So
Right.
it was kind of nice for them, or for me, for them to be that over that way. But at the same time, they're not getting as much attention because of all the attention is focused on like between Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft. Like those three lanes, there are two lanes between those three booths. So it'll be interesting to see how it evolves in the next couple of years for sure. But
Yeah, in general I hope for a focused reduction in attendance that
hmm
allows developers more space and more breathing room, I guess is probably the way I would characterize it. Like for something
hmm
like Shyness, the Lightning Kingdom, it's like they're blitzing through all these things, trying to fit in as many press, as many fans as absolutely possible. But it's like let's trim it down. Let's make sure everyone has decent representation, and then let's schedule appointments ahead, but let's leave
Yeah.
blocks of room to be able to see games
Or
like
even like I
that.
personally wouldn't mind if they extended it a day, you know?
Yeah,
Just have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But
it's not.
Friday's a lot of Friday's a lot
It's
of
tough because my
travel. Yes.
inclination is like, well, I'm gonna
Yeah.
fill that day, and then I'm even more tired when I come
Right.
back.
Yeah, so like a lot of people would use Friday to travel to get home, but I mean then just don't schedule that day. But
Yeah, or just do
again that's easy to say from this side because we're not paying to put a booth in on the show floor for 4 days.
yeah, it's tough. I don't know
So,
what form it should
I
take,
don't
but
know.
I guess it's nice when games that are smaller like this are given some pomp and circumstance or have nice looking booths and aren't
Hmm.
just shoved into the corner because when attendance numbers are up, it makes it very hard to spot some hidden gems
Yeah.
like shyness, to
They should
return.
have like separate zones. Like if your game is not playable, it goes on this side of the room. If it is playable, you get over here. Just so that people know like
And you just know where to hang
yeah,
out.
just segregate the game so that you know like if this is playable, you want to be over here so you can get a hands-on with it and then you can inform people about how it plays. If you just
Yeah.
have to if you can only watch a trailer, just watch the trailer online later.
The way they should do it is have the whole convention center is just all they use are the meeting rooms on like the upper level in the connecting hallways. And then it's like you have your appointments, you have your block of things to see. All you gotta do is walk down the hallway, go into these nice quiet rooms where you get to sit down, really appreciate the game, and they
Hmm.
they are free to tell you what's going on.
If only. But so
They need probably twice as many meeting rooms to make
yeah.
that work,
Oh
so
my God.
if not more.
And they build their own every year.
That's true too, yeah. They just
But
yeah. They literally run HVAC into the middle of the show floor. I have no idea how they do that, but
yeah, that's some of the yeah, you everybody should go check out some of like the setup images. Actually, they released a bunch
Mhm.
this year too, like the setup and takedown and all that. Like just to see what those the all the
Oh,
it's
it's
just the
absurd.
wires. Like just think of I actually said that to Ernest was we were waiting in line and we're looking around. I was looking at all the carpet, like how it's all cut to fit the booths and everything. I was like, how much do you think in carpeting alone is spent on this like place? Like that was the most random thought I had, but I was like, it's got
Oh
to be
man.
like
I
a
want to know
couple
what
$100,000 minimum.
I want to know what poor Ubisoft intern, poor PlayStation intern is like cutting all the carpets to fit the booths, like open up holes for the wiring because that's how intricate the wiring is
Yeah,
that the wiring's exact like laying and location needs to be planned to like the inch. You know what I mean? Because it
yeah.
needs to not be a tripping hazard. And freaking, my interview space with like Square Enix, I'm like, you guys have air conditioning. How did you achieve
Yeah.
this? Like you have vents above us, and we're in the middle of the show
And
floor, like with blaring
yeah,
music
and the
inside.
floor is perfectly leveled out, so you can't even feel if you're stepping over cords, which you know you're stepping over like thousands of them as you're in
Oh
there.
yeah,
But it's like
absolutely.
it's just ridiculous. Like
How could you
the
not be, right? Like some of the demo kiosks and stuff,
yeah,
like they have to. It's nuts. It's just completely nuts.
yeah. But
I guess it shows you that the convention center is well equipped for that kind of event. But
yeah, they're well rehearsed in doing this. So, I mean, that's like I've never had a problem navigating E3 before. So, I mean, that's a testament to the logistical wizards that they have
yeah, that's fair.
setting all
For
that
me,
up.
it's like even after year four, if you asked me to draw a map of like the convention center and the surrounding land, I wouldn't be able to get it exactly right. Like I
Hmm.
could get pretty close, but as soon as I step foot onto that campus, like I know exactly where I need to walk to get anywhere.
Hmm.
Like the hallways is what I remember, and turn left here, turn right here.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff I remember.
Awesome. So we talked about what we liked being there, but what was so like some I think the biggest omission that we expected for
Mhm.
this year's show was the Vita not being around.
God, it was even the the
No,
the absence was.
somebody found well actually yeah somebody found or Adam showed a picture to us where they actually did say Vita in like the little footnote of
Oh
one
yeah, it was a
trailer,
trailer logo,
so it
right?
did have an appearance in the
Yeah,
Sony conference.
and the copyright info.
Yeah.
Yeah, the absence of the silence of Vita's corner was louder than ever this year. I
Hmm.
mean, like just not even a blip on really anybody's radar. Well, I shouldn't say anybody's radar. It wasn't a blip on Sony's radar. Actually, I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't think I saw a Vita all week long. I didn't see any demos hooked up to
No,
a Vita.
just other people
Uh,
playing them while waiting in line.
yeah, basically,
That's the only thing.
they're piss Vitas.
Piss Vitas. Yeah, so
So it's a
it's
tough
it's
time. It's a
basically
tough time for Vita
it's
land.
like it's completely dead now. Like it's at least as far as Sony seems to be concerned, is this they've completely
Yeah,
moved on from it.
what I think about it is that it's kind of entered, at least in my mind, it's sort of entered the same crescendo that the PSP eventually hit, where it became, now granted, the PSP was way more of a success than Vita was in
Yep.
general. But toward the end of the PSP's life, its much longer life, it started becoming a machine for, I don't want to say obscure games, or because that implies, negativity, but just like really
Right.
niche titles. A lot of Japanese games, a lot of
Yep.
RPGs, a lot of kind of indie titles that flew under the radar, but it was a relatively inexpensive platform to develop for. And
Hmm.
I think Vita is kind of starting to hit that stride. Yeah, there's a couple companies that come to mind, like Xseed is one where they
Yep.
continue to bring, they continue to import and localize these sort of Japanese gems over to Vita, and there's like a dedicated audience there that wants to play those games because Xseed keeps doing it, and they keep putting in the money to localize it.
Yeah, but then you have people on the opposite end, like Square, who has a game called I Am Setsuna, and they're releasing it on Vita in Japan, but they're not going to localize it for Vita in the US,
Which is,
which makes no sense because they would make so much money off of that.
you know what's absurd about it too is that they've already localized it because it's coming out on PS4.
Right. So
So
why
like,
can't you just like have some random intern just like spend a couple weeks and just like
yeah, just like
change the
compressing the audio
dialogue?
files
Yeah.
to fit on the file platform. I don't know. That is
Uh,
a really strange one. I can even forgive FF12 HD for not being on Vita because that might just
yeah.
simply be. And I know I like to forgive it is I shouldn't be forgiving them for it,
That
but
was as soon as I got my Vita, like within the first week, I was like, I want Final Fantasy 12 on this thing.
remote play. There you go. I just solved that for you.
No.
Because that's smooth and some experience.
Because that works.
Yep. No, I mean, a game like that, I can kind of sort of see where they're coming from because it is so large and they're doing a lot. Like they're repainting all of the textures in that game, which I will grant you they did for Final Fantasy X when they released that remaster. But by all accounts, even FF10 2, I I don't think it was a shit show on Vita by any means, but I know it had kind of a crappy frame rate and like
Yeah.
it was clearly starting to push what Vita could do. So I
Hmm.
imagine that with 12, one major thing they did is they went back to all of the game's very blurry faces. Like the game always had just really odd looking faces.
Hmm.
And it like repainted all those faces to make them crystal clear because they actually told me in my interview that was literally a limitation of the PS2. Like they had this art style in mind and the PS2 couldn't run it. So one of the tricks they did was like, all right, guess our game has blurry faces now, and that's the artistic decision.
Huh.
So they cleaned that up and done other things. I get why it's not on Vita, but yeah, the Setsuna thing is crazy because that game already exists.
Yep.
It could come over later, but at the same
Yeah.
time, Square just yesterday brought Adventures of Mana, which is a remake of I want to say Final Fantasy Chronicles.
Hmm.
What's the first game in the Mana side series? But that is kind of a classic, sort of beloved RPG that just appeared on Vita yesterday. So
Yeah.
it's not that they're, not Final Fantasy Adventure. That's the game I'm thinking of.
Hmm.
Not Chronicles. That was 1 and 2 on PS1
Yeah, that's
disc.
what I was wondering about.
And Zero Time Dilemma just came out yesterday.
Oh.
From the relatively obscure visual.
Yesterday meaning Tuesday, by the way, because we're
Yes,
recording
yes,
this on.
yes. Both, yeah, both Adventures of Mana and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Zero Dilemma are Tuesday releases. So those are both out, and then there's God Eater Resurrection. There's so all the three things these games all have in common: Japanese developers.
Hmm.
Presumably, they were originally developed in the East, or at least by a Japanese team with Japanese voices, and then some kind of process had to happen to bring them over here. So in one sense, that's encouraging, and it's not like there are Vita games out there that I. It's not like I've played all of them, like Nuclear
Oh
Throne
yeah,
has
for
good
sure.
buzz. I never
But it's just
stepped.
like there aren't the Western games that people want in the States
No, and there
on there
never
at
will be.
all, and that's what they just. I mean, we've said this before, and everybody's said this already. It's just like they needed one of their big developers. Sony needed one of their big developers just to commit to this and say we're gonna jump in first, and like we're gonna make a game that we want to make on this
Yeah.
mobile device, and if it tanks, it tanks. Like Sony's just has to accept that because they
Mm.
needed to do it. But
Do you think that if the PS4 had come out first and we got maybe a different handheld, maybe it's not called the Vita, maybe it is, but it's more powerful and it comes out, say, 2015 or 2016, that could have been a turnaround in terms of like courting developers and getting them to do things on Vita. Because I think one of the issues was that there was no PS4 when the Vita came out,
hmm
and Sony was still in a lot of ways shedding the ill will that it built up during the early PS3 years. Including developers like Valve had famous or Gabe Newell had famously said like this thing is shit to develop for. Like I
hmm
hate making games for this.
yeah,
So and they started to recover from that, but it's like the Vita came out on the tail end of that. It got a few developer winks early on because it was just a new system. You have to put something on it. But then everyone in the West, at least, very quickly abandoned it.
yeah.
I feel like if a Sony handheld came out today and it was their second handheld, like the Vita had never happened, I think it would stand a stronger chance of succeeding just because there are so many teams in Sony's court right now, and making all the right moves to attract these developers.
hmm
And there's just such an install base. I think with so many people buying PS4s, you would probably get your theoretical handheld off to a better start than the Vita got.
Yeah, it would have been a better pairing to have done PS4 before Vita than Vita before PS4 because just the Vita was just yeah, like you're saying, it came out towards the end of the PS3 life cycle. So
Which,
it was in
like,
this. It was just
presumably,
kind of in limbo because it was. It would have been better if they would have designed the PS Vita to work specifically with the PS4, like a year after it had been out. Like
hmm
get their new console out, iron out some of the wrinkles, and have a handheld that comes out that works like that's fully compatible in certain ways. Not like maybe not play PS4 games on it, but be able to have it communicate freely with each other.
hmm
And even like at that point, then you could have the DualShock 4 work with the PS TV and be able to use the touchpad and all that stuff for some of the interactive
Yeah,
scenes.
that's a good point.
So then they would have saved all that, and that wouldn't have tanked. So it was just a. I mean, I'm still happy that the Vita came out when it did because I had something new in that in between that I was excited about, and the
hmm
PSP was well, kind of dead and gone for a lot of U.S. gamers by then. For me, for sure, it kind of
Yeah,
was.
for me it was too. I wasn't doing much with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the tough thing too is that when by the time Vita came out, that's probably when a lot of devs started to hear the first inklings of PS4 and receive their first prototypes not long after. So it's
Yeah.
like you've already got something cooking in the background. Like you can't be working on a Vita title when this new console is coming out in a year and a half and you've got work to do on it.
hmm
If you want to make like the launch window, which a lot of their first party people did, kind of makes sense why Sucker Punch never made a Vita game because they would have been working on Infamous Second Son. That I mean
Yeah.
that they showed that game the moment the world knew about PS4. Like that
Yeah.
was one of the very first games they showed during the reveal event.
hmm
So they just yeah, it's unfortunate, but that's all right because there's a lot of stuff to play on it right now, including Zero Time Dilemma, which is a
hmm
game that I was personally very, very excited about.
Are you still excited about it? Because you were reviewing it for us. You're still in the
Yes, I am.
middle of. I don't know if you're going to finish it from what you're saying.
Oh, I'll definitely finish it.
Okay.
And I'm getting close. Like at this point, if I need to, I'll reference a guide, which I've actually done a couple times already. I'll explain why I
Right.
had to in a bit. But
He is
yeah, no,
not.
I'll
Kyle
start.
is not one of those gamers that usually does that. So it's
No, that's a
extenuating
sign of
circumstance to
right.
have. Yeah.
It's definitely a sign of how desperate it has become. And it's not like I didn't get stuck on the previous game as well, but that was a weird one where we reviewed it
hmm
probably a couple weeks after it came out because nobody really knew about it, and I kind of discovered it. This was more of a case of like, all right, E3 is over. I have Zero Time Dilemma to review, and its embargo is up in a week, and if you're not done by then, you're kind of screwed. And I was not done by then, despite my best efforts. So I'm approaching the end. I can tell because there is a way that the game kind of tracks how much of it you've seen,
hmm
even if you don't have like a strict percentage meter or anything. But yeah, it's
Well, let's start with like what's zero time,
certainly.
like that kind of whole thing. Just like the what type of game? I guess we can start off with
Yeah,
that.
so we're talking about the Zero Escape series, which first appeared to PlayStation gamers with Virtue's Last Reward on Vita. So the name of the series is Zero Escape, and then what comes after is always the subtitle. So it's Zero Escape, Virtue's Last Reward, and what I'm playing is technically called Zero Escape, Zero Time Dilemma.
Hmm.
It's the unfortunate redundancy there. But yeah, at their core, they are psychological thrillers with heavy puzzle adventure elements. You can kind of think of it as like the philosophical Japanese Saw. Like,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
pretty good way of elevator pitching it, I think. So in terms of gameplay, it's basically 50% visual novel and 50% puzzle rooms, kind of like there's an iOS game that's pretty popular called The Room, where you try to navigate around this tricky box, figure out these weird clues and relationships. In this case, you're trying to escape from rooms, and they're very sophisticated rooms with a lot of stuff going on. You might be in a biology lab, or you might be in a garbage disposal room or a hospital ward, and it's all about interacting with the things around you, figuring out relationships between like numbers and colors and clues and patterns to try to find your way out of it. Because in every game, the cast has been imprisoned by a man named Zero, or a thing, a villain named Zero, and it's all about figuring out your way out of these situations, figuring out who Zero is, how do we get out of the situation. So that's where all the Saw stuff comes in,
Hmm.
uh, with regards to the terror elements. So I loved Virtue's Last Reward. Again, the previous game. I think it came out in 2011 on Vita. Either 11 or 12. It was 12. I absolutely loved it to death. It's my second favorite Vita game after Persona 4 Golden. And in
Yeah.
terms of all the games I've ever played, I wouldn't necessarily place it in the top 10, but
That would
top
yeah, that
20
would surprise
probably.
me if it was in top
Yeah,
10.
no, it's certainly something
So
I
yeah,
love
like
to
I
death.
played it and I really like I enjoyed it, but it never impacted me that same way. I guess going through some of it was just like there are moments where it's just kind of they do have branching pathways and what happens, who dies when, or the result of what, or who's really the
Mhm.
bad person, or what that kind of stuff. But it was sometimes it was predictable. There were some times where it wasn't predictable, but I wasn't like shocked by it.
Sure.
But there were some really cool moments in it, but it was just more of a I don't know. It was more of just kind of a going through the motions to just see what happens for a lot of it for me than actually just like a gripping novel or like comic motion comic that
Yeah, sure.
so I think part of it is that my time with it was broken up so much playing it like I didn't get like long sessions to sit and just play,
Yeah,
which I
for me
think
that
that
was
would
like
have
a
made a
straight
difference.
it was like a straight week and a half where I just took my Vita with me everywhere, and I would like squeeze in time with the
Yeah.
puzzles in
I played
between
it on like
classes.
breaks at work and stuff and it was
Yeah.
during the summer and it was
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, it's for me, the story of Virtue's Last Reward hooked me because it was a story that could really only be told in a video game. To describe why is total spoiler territory, so I won't go there. But it's
sure.
just one thing that impressed the pants off me about the game, and it's something that Zero Time Dilemma does still achieve as the third game, is that it uses the fact that you, the player, are involved in the story in like really interesting ways, and you really can't tell the story with a movie, or at least it wouldn't have any of the same impact. It wouldn't make any of the same sense. And it uses the power of choice to really reinforce that.
Hmm.
So Zero Time Dilemma. First of all, this game was an unlikely prospect to even exist. Axis, or I guess it would have been, well, Axis published it, Spike Chunsoft developed it. Um, they were not going to fund the third game in the series because of poor sales of Virtue's Last Reward. But there was such an intense social media kind of grassroots petition to have the third entry to see how it all ends, because two Virtues ends on such a cliffhanger that actually successfully like greenlit the sequel, or the third and final game in the series. So a few years later, we do have that final entry, and here's the thing. It is really disappointing in a lot of ways,
Hmm.
but I'm still enjoying myself.
Okay. Explain.
Well, gosh,
So
so like
what's the, so
essentially,
is well, I think you divide it between like the story,
yeah,
like the mystery, and then the puzzles. I think so. Those are the two pillars of these
yeah, exactly.
games.
Hmm. Yeah, so okay, yeah, so to touch on the pillars, what the game is still really strong at is is spinning a story that has these kind of weird philosophical hooks and these weird sort of scientific explanations. Uchikoshi, the lead writer and creator, reminds me a lot of Hideo Kojima in some ways because he'll just dive off into these tangents about like random historical events that don't
Hmm.
really like relate to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Just like weird scientific theories or philosophy problems like Schrodinger's cat or the not the Morphe problem, but there's a few like philosophical questions and dilemmas that are explored in both games.
Sure.
And he'll just dive into like characters will just randomly start espousing in great length about these concepts, and it's just like you're just like a teenager. Like, what are you talking about? And how do you know this? So like the games have a weird flavor like that, very Kojima-esque thing.
Yeah.
So Zero Time Dilemma definitely has that flavor still, like which I'm super glad about because it, given the somewhat troubled development of it, you would worry that oh maybe things are going to change or they're going to do things differently. But it's very much it feels like the third game that the team probably always wanted to make, and it just the existence of it was in danger for a little while. So that's great. The story it's pretty fulfilling as somebody who played Virtue's Last Reward. I never played the first game, 999, on the DS, but I've read the plot synopses in great length because you kind of have to.
Hmm.
Uh, and it's got great callbacks to characters from those games. Some some loose narrative threads have been resolved even now at this point without me having finished it. So in general, it's a strong story. It's also told in a very different way. So if you recall, Will, with Virtue's Last Reward, you navigate through the game, you make key choices, and then as the player, you're allowed to go back to points in the story and see what would happen if you made a different choice.
Hmm.
And that's kind of the structure of it. But no matter what you're doing, the game is always very clear about saying you are here on this flow chart of like possible outcomes. With Zero Time Dilemma, you are given just a big pool of moments to choose that you want to play. Like you just see like a picture of what's happening in that moment, and you'll
Okay.
play that moment, and it doesn't tell you anything about where that happens in the timeline, like what choices are involved, what events that it comes after, or what events it precedes,
Hmm.
until you've completed that story moment. And then it drops a pin in the flowchart and says, like, this is where that happened,
Huh.
or this is where that happened. So,
That sounds really interesting to me. Like, I think that sounds pretty cool, but
and it fits the narrative too, because in this twisted game, the villain Zero is the bracelet that all the characters are wearing injects a amnesia drug every 90 minutes. So they'll experience something, usually like a puzzle room and a cutscene or some major choice,
hmm.
and then if they're still alive, they'll all just drop asleep after 90 minutes of like in-game time.
Hmm.
So, and then when they wake up, and so that's what's funny about it is that when you pick a fragment to play, it usually opens up with the three characters like waking up and going, what's been happening? So it like really mirrors what you as the player are feeling, like
Sure.
not having any idea what the hell's going on or where you are or how we got here. Like that's totally the way the characters feel too. Just waking up and being like, how did we get in this biology lab? Or how did we wait, who's alive? Oh, okay, good. You're still here. Like just
Hmm.
very confused kind of things. So I haven't yet gotten far enough to where the reason for that resolves itself. Like I'm fully expecting some major twist about, how all these big moments fit together and what's the real message going on. But yeah, the story is strong, I guess, to say. And this is kind of useful for me sort of synthesizing what's coming in the review.
Hmm.
So here's what's wrong with the game. For starters, it uses a new art style in terms of 3D fully animated cutscenes. The
Okay.
previous game was strict visual novel. Like I think the character models were somewhat three-dimensional, but then it was just text boxes and just static expressions. This is actually like cutscenes with people moving and animating and like full voice acting that's, playing out. The problem is it looks like absolute dog shit.
Hmm.
It's just crudely animated to the point of like it looks like the worst kind of like Steam green light fodder you see in YouTube videos. Like
Okay.
just horribly like God, I really hate to be insulting as I say this. Like the animation quality and like lip syncing and just the stiffness and awkwardness of it all is just straight like B minus school project levels. I mean, it's bad, like really, really bad. And it's bad enough that even though I've been playing it now for over 20 hours, I still find it distracting. Like
Hmm.
in during emotional moments, like when people are like, emotions are running high, people are exclaiming something, I'm still just like, Christ Almighty, could you speak in tune with what you're saying, or could you not run like you have a board up your butt? It's so rough, and I can appreciate the things that having animated cutscenes do. For example, the game is more visually gory and more like kind of visceral and grisly than the previous game was, whereas the previous game left some of those things to the imagination. Like you might
Yeah.
walk into a room and all of a sudden it would cut from like an empty room to like dun dun like a view of everybody dead on the floor. Which
Hmm.
was cool in and of its own right because it's just so shocking and sudden. This actually you see characters like attacking each other. There are stabbings, there are decapitations, there's a hydrogen fluoride shower or a hydrofluoric acid shower.
Jeez.
So like you kind of see a lot of those moments, and it really adds some shock value, but it comes at the cost of like story moments that are actually like well portrayed. Like it just looks like it looks like ass. It looks awful.
So some of those animated moments, so those animated moments actually do add to it a bit, like the action parts.
I think it's in some ways a trade-off because the other thing that you lose is because all the cutscenes are fully voiced, there's never really a time when the main character is like thinking to himself or like describing what he's seeing in his own internal monologue. And that was a pretty, I mean, I wouldn't
That
be
happened
able
a
to put a
lot.
number on it. Yeah, I would say it's like 50-50 in the previous game. Like the main
Yeah.
character Sigma is always like expressing his thoughts to the player and thinking about what he's seeing and commenting on what he's seeing. How does it make him feel? What does he
Yeah.
remember? And like that's really insightful stuff and it really adds to the writing. This you're basically just hearing what characters say to each other with only a couple very brief exceptions. So you do lose that element of intrigue, and the writing is good and the voice acting is good. But it does feel a little more Hollywood, I guess, to not have that internal monologuing. And
Yeah.
even though you do get the visceral shock of seeing some of those grisly moments, to be if I have to choose between that with the awkward, stiff, janky
Hmm.
animations, or can I choose the still images and just more of it is left to the imagination? I would take that imagination like any day.
Would it have worked well if they would have spent all that time on the animation just for those action moments and then leave the rest as still images
Oh
type of
yeah, I
thing?
think I think that could have been cool. Like have it flow back and forth. Like
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I think that yeah, totally. I could see that. That could have been a nice way to evolve it, but yeah, unfortunately they didn't do that. It's all just a lump sum, and
Hmm.
unfortunately you get just really awkward eye movements, jittery faces, characters who like have to turn their entire heads to look at each other. Just
Mm.
really like stuff that really was ironed out back in like the PS2 days.
Yeah.
Uh, that again, the art style, like the characters, the character designs, the cell shading, that actually all looks really good. And on Vita, it's pretty crisp and colorful. It's really the animations that do it in the lip syncing.
Okay.
But that's only one piece that I hold against it.
Okay.
And this is the big one for me, even more so than the stiffness in the animations. Like to some extent, you can just accept that and get used to it. But the puzzles really, really bug me.
Mm.
This is somewhat surprising to me too, because I've read a few reviews now that there are ones up online, and clearly the game's not broken. Like there are people that have finished the game, which is great for them. But what I'm finding with the puzzles in this one is that they're more. A lot of them are simpler in terms of like the logic and relationships that you have to piece together with the clues you're finding. Like it's there, but it runs the gamut from these puzzles that are like cakewalk easy to the point of it's just like, yep, that goes there, that goes there.
Right.
5 seconds of thinking, okay, I see how that works. Okay, cool, plug that in, and then you're just like done.
Hmm.
And then there are others where you're going along at that pace, and then suddenly, boom, dead stop. Like, what the heck do I do now?
So
Like, it's
just like
just so
completely changing the what they want you to do in the puzzle without any hint. Like that kind of
yeah.
they have different expectations without telling you that they do.
Yeah, it's like Broken Age, Broken Age, missed, like just suddenly breaks
Hmm.
to like the super old school like, and like it's not a term that I've used very often until now, but I've seen it bandied about a little bit on the internet. Pixel hunting is like the best way to describe some of these moments. So there are times when, and really this is kind of responsible for most of the times I'm getting stuck.
Right.
And again, your mileage may vary. Like this to some extent it's a subjective me thing, and others might not be bothered by it as much. But like I have been stuck for multiple hours on the same puzzle because there's this extra arbitrary step that they want you to do even though you've already figured out the logic of the puzzle. It's like if I look at a whole room of objects and I see, okay, these five objects all fit together like this. I know that and I can see that they do and I can see that's what you want me to do. But
Hmm.
why isn't tapping on them working? Like
Yeah.
why isn't connecting them working?
Sounds like the longest journey.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it reminds me a lot of like, yeah, Grim Fandango's another one. Like, those totally the vibe I was getting was some of those really just hair-pulling moments of like, just it's right in front of you, and I know it is, but it's like, just show like, can we be done with this? Can we just
Yeah.
move on? Like, I figured you out already, and
Hmm.
the two puzzles that I've had to look up just out of desperation, because I'm like, I need to move on. Like, this isn't even a
Hmm.
me problem anymore. This is a you problem. I see the answer, and I'm like, really? So literally it was that, and this is how bad the pixel hunting can get to. There was one puzzle where there's a machine and you have to use the machine. Beakers. Man, I won't spoil it.
Hmm.
But there's a machine that you have to use, and it's abundantly clear that you have to put an item in your inventory inside the machine. But I'm tapping on the machine with the item equipped, and it's like, oh, but wow, just we don't know how to use that, or we can't use that right now.
Hmm.
And I'm tapping everywhere in the room, including at objects that look like they're interactable because their color is just a little different or they're
Right.
standing out a bit from the drab background. And I'm not getting anything. I'm not getting anything. Finally, I look it up. The thing that I needed to tap on, I had intentionally tried to tap on a few times, but must have just been like 1 pixel off with my thumb and not registered it. So it's not even like
Hmm.
super accurate when you're trying to hit something that like, and it's a small object, it's in the background, it's kind of not really hidden behind things, but it would be similar to like if you had a bookshelf and you were trying to tap a specific book because it looked kind of out of place to you.
Right.
It's a thing where I'm like, oh, that looks like I can tap it. So I did it once, nothing. Twice, my thumb landed in a slightly different spot, nothing.
Hmm.
A third time, still nothing. I'm like, all right, I guess that's nothing. Hit up the internet 3 hours later. No, that's something. I just missed it by like a pixel. You know what I mean? I just
Yeah.
so
Hmm.
that's I've dealt with that a couple times, as well as those more longest journey moments where it's like the logic is simple, and it's like the developers realized the logic was simple, but they're like, okay, what can we inject here to delay the player from finishing this too?
Yeah.
And it literally feels like you could have taken this out because I figured your shit out already, but you just placed it here because you're like, well, the puzzle's not hard enough. Well, then if the puzzle's not hard enough, then fix the puzzle. Like
Yeah.
make the relationships more complex or make me juggle more simultaneous thoughts. Don't like,
Right. Don't sacrifice fun for challenge
yeah, don't
or
throw an
pseudo
arbitrary,
challenge.
exactly, yeah, don't throw an arbitrary like time delayer in there. So in that sense, the puzzles are a really disappointing step down from the previous game in the series,
Yeah.
which I thought were more difficult actually in general, but also more fair. Like it was the relationships between items that were difficult. It was
Hmm.
the patterns that were difficult. It wasn't just the arbitrary crap. So it's been surprising to see a lot of reviews praise the puzzles and call them like best in the series. I don't necessarily know that I don't honestly see how you can objectively say that. So to some extent, I wonder if people have actually played the other games. But
Huh.
to me, they're definitely the weakest point of the game, and it's hindering my enjoyment a great deal. I mean, it's the main reason that there isn't a review up on PSU right now. It's just that I've
Hmm.
continually hit those walls which is tough before a game comes out because there's literally no resource to
Yeah.
depend on. Like I couldn't have looked at a guide up until like
Right.
Monday if I had wanted to, you know?
Hmm. Oh, well, that's actually really just is kind of depressing to hear.
I know because I don't know. I'll have to wait until I finish it to obviously render the final verdict, and I would say that I'm
Right.
more positive than negative in general because I think I can't ding it too much for those puzzle moments because clearly it's not bothering everybody the way it bothers me. Although I'm finding forums now that the game is out where people are like, "What the hell do I do?"
Hmm.
So yeah, your mileage may vary, and the other things the game does, it does right, except for the visuals. So those are just those two pretty significant hurdles that you have to get over. But I think if you have played any of the previous games, I mean, it's a no-brainer. You have to play this one.
All right.
The story so far is that good, and I expect it to get even better.
Huh. Well, all right. That's a good note to end on, I think. So awesome. Well, thanks for listening to was it, episode 32 of PlayStation Fix. We're talking
Hmm.
about all our E3 experiences, Vita life, and
The
Kyle's
woes of Vita life.
Kyle's pre-review review of Zero Time Dilemma.
Yes, for sure. I'll aim to
Yeah.
have a review up this weekend, so we won't miss release date by too much.
Yeah,
But
so you guys can get his full thoughts, more detail. I mean, it sounds like you went pretty deep into it, but yeah, for sure, check out his full thoughts on it, and we'll have the almighty score attached to it for those people who need to see a number coming out later. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Make sure you follow. Actually, if you didn't see, since we was talking about E3, we got so many videos that went up this year on PS YouTube. Go check those out in the impressions. You'll see them on the listed also on psu.com. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at psu.dotcom and on Twitch for all the streaming and that stuff. Periscope, we got our man Ernest is using Periscope now for some of this stuff. All right, trying to think of that. I don't think there's anything else I missed.
no, man, I think you pimped it all.
I think we got all this stuff. So yeah, make sure you stay tuned to PSU for all your gaming news, more episodes of PlayStation Fix, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Yeah, thanks for listening.